Right, hello everyone, and welcome to the Show Reboot podcast. I'm your host Ross Baxter, and today is episode 35 of the series. We've got an incredible guest for you. We've got a senior environment artist from StarBreeze Studios. We've got Vlad on the show. How you doing, man?
I'm good, Russ. Thank you for having me on. How are you?
I'm doing great. You see, I kept it simple. I just went with Vlad.
You did. Yeah, that name always gets everyone. It was hell ordering pizza even back home. So yeah, no worries.
I was like, this is a risk. I better not say it.
Yeah.
There's like so many names so many guests that come on, and I'm just like, I'm so sorry if I butcher your name. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no worries, man. I know it's a hard name, but I'm keeping it. I'm not changing it. Just proud of it, keeping it there.
Perfect. Right. As always, everyone who's tuning into the podcast is a weekly series where I bring on guests from all creative backgrounds, from environment art to concept art, you name it. The podcast pretty much covers it. The great thing about Vlad is he's an amazing environment artist. So before we even kick things off, all 1,700 of you, go spam his follow button. Make sure to give him a follow. Appreciate the man's artwork. He's incredible. Vlad's worked on many incredible games, and we can go into depth about his journey. Not only his journey, but also talk about student education and just his perspective in general.
All right. Thanks for all the good words, man.
Anytime, man. Anytime. You deserve it, man. It's there's so much stuff I want to talk about, like designer, etc. If you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
Perfect. If you're new to the podcast, everyone, the podcast is live on 9 other platforms alongside YouTube. We're live on Anchor, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Radio Public, and last but not least, we've got Stitcher. Obviously, the main thing for the podcast is you guys, the students. So please share your art links in the comments below. And what I'll do is on the next podcast, I'll give you a shout out and showcase your work on the podcast. But with all that said, let's get into the podcast, man. Thanks for doing this.
All right, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
So as always, just start off with the obvious one. So just tell us a wee bit about yourself, like who you are and what you do. It'd be great to hear.
Sure. So I'm Vlad Vanzariuc, which is the last name that gives everyone a bit of pause. So I've been in the industry as an environment artist for about 8 years, I think now. Started off a bit after college. Worked on a small indie company with a friend of mine. Well, not just like the friend recommended me there, so I started working there. It was a really great experience, actually. Loved that indie vibe. It's just that it was a very new company. It was in Romania, so it kind of folded after about 6 months, unfortunately. After that one, I basically just kind of went back to the drawing board a bit and practiced my skills a lot more. And I managed to land a job at Ubisoft Romania, Ubisoft Bucharest,
awesome.
which was it was basically the dream job at that point. So I was very happy about it. Stayed there for about 5 to 6 years, worked on some pretty cool projects. The latest one was Ghost Recon Wildlands, which was, I think, my favorite so far working on, simply because it tested out like a lot of new workflows that are starting to become kind of standard, like Houdini, stuff like that. Then moved on to StarBreeze Studios here in Stockholm. Want to try out a bit of a smaller team, see how that works out. Because like I said, in the beginning, I really enjoyed that closeness that you get with working with a small team. What everyone does, the people. It's sort of, I don't want to go into the cliches and say it feels like a family, but you definitely get very close friendships, and
of course,
both working and outside of work. So that's something that I definitely enjoy.
Perfect. So that's where you're at now, and that's awesome to hear, because obviously when it comes to like the podcast, the main thing is like the story and like your path, and there's nothing wrong with the cliche, because at the end of the day, it's the cliche information that it's good to highlight, because there's so many for example, so many questions that students ask, and the typical one is like, how did you get there? And like the obvious answer is like you can tell that you clearly just like you worked on your craft and so forth. and you got to where you wanted to go. Like so.
Yeah, that's pretty much all there is. Almost.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so the thing is, yeah, it's working definitely, like, because the portfolio is the thing that everyone's going to see. So it's ultimately the most important thing that you can do.
Yeah.
But other more important things that I think are being mentioned in more business-oriented articles, but not many in the games, is the networking. And what I mean by networking is not, preferential treatment. It's just getting your name out there and at least having people know you. Because, for example, you just meet an artist from a company that you want to work on, that you want to work at, and he might have never heard of you. But that way you literally just oh shit, you're pretty good.
Yeah.
Let's want to interview, want to do a test, want to come over, stuff like that.
So like when did like when it comes to like just like environment in general, like when did it all start off for you? Like was it like how long have you been doing art for?
Well, I've actually started doing 3D sometime in high school, I think. So when I was around maybe 14 to 15.
Okay.
But I was just messing around, trying to learn it simply because it was this mind-blowing thing. I was always fascinated by 3D. Don't know if you know the TV show Reboot.
Oh, I've never heard of this, but
Yeah, it's an ancient one.
awesome. No, let me know. I've never heard of it. It sounds cool.
Well, I'm not recommending it. I don't know how good it is now.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah. Like, don't take it as a recommendation. It's just that it was 3D and it was like very early. Think about it as like early 90s 3D, like
Okay.
the sort of you'd see in a PS1 kind of full motion video.
Super old school.
Yeah, exactly. But it was mind blowing to me back then. I was like, oh wow, what is this magic?
Yeah.
And then I saw like Diablo 2's cinematics, and that's when this is it. I gotta find out how to do this. So after a bit of search, I found out about 3ds Max. Managed to get my hands on it, and yeah, I don't know, it just clicked.
Yeah.
It was really, really fun just seeing everything move in 3D, rendering everything. Yeah, so I guess in that, but seriously, when I started taking environment art seriously, I think was about in my last year of college, I think. Kind of had a break in between the last few years of high school and the first one in college. Like,
Okay.
I just moved from a small town where I was born. I moved into Bucharest, which was a huge difference. So I just wanted to, I think I just wanted to enjoy life there and see, what it's like.
Yeah.
And then I kind of, let's get back into serious stuff again.
Let the 3D begin. Let it all start.
Yeah.
Nah,
Yeah, pretty much.
That's great because obviously like because I was the same as you when it came to like it all kicked off for me in secondary school, and my it's crazy. It was like all because of my teacher. We actually had 3ds Max in secondary school, believe it or not, and
Wow.
like I was really surprised. I don't know. So I live in like a really small city in Scotland, and I don't know. We had 3ds Max, we had Photoshop. It was just weird. It's like, so I came into 3ds Max when I was 14, 15.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I was super young, and it was actually because of the film Tintin that got me obsessed into 3D. Like I was just geeking out
Oh,
about.
that's a beautiful movie. Yeah.
Oh, I just,
The one by Steven Spielberg, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
oh, I've loved that film. I just wish I really hope they make the second one, but it's been, I think it's like 7 years or 8 years now since they made it.
Did they say they were going to make a second one, or is it just something that you'd like to do?
So
Well, they would like to do.
basically what the announcement was that Spielberg said that he would pass over the directing role to Peter Jackson. So they would swap over. So instead of Spielberg directing it, Peter Jackson would direct it instead.
Okay.
And I'm not sure what the role's called. That Peter Jackson, is it a producer? I think it's producer.
Okay.
So I think that's the role he's been, like he switched over for Spielberg. But what they were going to do was make the, what's it called? Oh gosh, what's it called? It's the one about, it's the second one about the ship. So they were basically like merging 3 stories into one somehow. I don't know how they're going about it though.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I didn't follow anything afterwards. I just was like, wow, this is an amazing movie, and but I didn't follow it too closely afterwards.
Yeah. Oh, I really hope. But before I get off tangent, I can talk about this stuff for ages.
Yeah, I know.
Obviously, like we could talk about art for ages, but the main thing, obviously, when it comes to podcasts, is student education, and
Sure.
it'd be great to hear about your journey and your perspective, and just hearing what you've done. So, I always kind of stick to the same four questions, man, and then
Yep.
tailor things around that, basically. So the first
Okay.
question, because I know you studied at university. So
Yep.
what do you wish you learned? Obviously, maybe coming from an environment art perspective,
Mm-hmm.
when you were studying at university, is there anything you wish maybe you were taught, or that things that stand out?
Yeah, so just to, the college that I studied at wasn't, we didn't have degrees in game design or game art or anything given related to that.
Okay,
So I studied industrial design in college, which
perfect.
was relatively close. I mean, it helps kind of bit with, understanding more mechanical things and getting an idea for how, they always have the saying function before form. And that one kind of applies, well, not kind of, it applies quite a bit to video games as well. But, what I would like if I were to, if now I could do a degree or someone does a degree, what I think the best thing to look for and something that I really wish I could have learned is working within a team and simulating like a real life project,
Yeah,
because that's how you learn. Okay, you need to understand what design is doing, what programming is doing, what VFX artists are doing, what the producers are doing. It depends, of course, on the scale and how large your team is.
yeah,
But ultimately, you got to understand how to collaborate and work with with all the people in the team, because it is a team effort, and that's the most important thing. I think that's something that I notice now. It's like a lot of new people who get into the industry, their art is usually pretty good, but they don't really understand what design does and why they keep changing stuff around, and it gets frustrating. And I get it, and I think this would be a good way to mitigate that thing.
yeah. Like it's when it comes to like the whole sort of team thing. Like this is where my debate comes into like the student education system, and it's basically that, like for example, I went to university and it was third and fourth year that basically you get to decide like what kind of career path do you want to take,
Yeah.
what kind of art do you want to make, and obviously some courses have like what we're discussing, this group based sort of system, but it'd be really good if well, what's your thoughts on like say in a third and fourth year system of education, do you think having like just tons of group projects it would be more beneficial than maybe personal projects? Like, what's your kind of take on that?
Yeah, because ultimately they're still personal projects. I don't know, what do you mean by personal projects? As in each student individually does whatever they want?
Yeah,
Yeah, I guess a mix of that would be good, simply because it's kind of hard to make everyone get along. But I personally, I would like to see at least one project, a team project, where they learn, because that's how they're going to work in the real world.
yeah,
Unless they want to do absolutely everything by themselves, which is extremely rare in game development. There are a few examples of games where a developer has done that, but they are extremely rare, and it's going to take you a lot longer. So ultimately, train them for the most likely case, and the most likely case, even if it's a small indie team, they will work within a team.
yeah,
So I think that's very, very important to do, because you also, it teaches you, okay, how do I put my ideas forward? Because you're going to have to convince a bunch of people that, okay, guys, let's do my idea, or maybe you learn how to accept other people's ideas better, stuff like that, which is extremely important to collaboration.
yeah. Like the great thing, I guess, like that I liked that you said there. Obviously, there's the whole topic of collaboration, but it's um, like do you know when it's like, well, it's pretty much exactly what you said. But do you know like when people start off their first job and stuff, and they either maybe they don't understand the concept of like how much sort of, I wouldn't say the words power, but do you like when obviously like you bounce around, like you'll share the piece you're working on with multiple people. So like for example, if randomly say you're working on a, I don't know, a car, and
Yeah.
people tend to have this sort of feeling of, I guess, oh, I want to make all the car and stuff, and I think it would be great when it comes to like the group project aspect of like they start sharing like maybe the project around just to get that sort of feeling of you don't own the piece.
Um,
I'm not sure what
yeah.
your thoughts are on that.
Yeah, I'm trying to think of it how it would work in like because ultimately in AAA production at least your pieces do go to multiple people. It's just the way it is. Some people will be pulled to a different map that maybe needs help, and they will work on it, and you will be pulled to something that's easier to do, stuff like that. So there's these sort of changes constantly happening. But I think maybe that's something that you just learn in production, even though it's harder to accept.
Yeah.
Just because ultimately, from college, if they do that, then it's harder for you to say, okay, I've worked on this thing in your portfolio piece, because you need some ownership just so possible employers know what you've done.
Yeah.
So while that would be a good exercise, ultimately, kind of, I don't think it would help them very much
Okay.
if they were to move the piece around, and because they wouldn't be able to say, okay, I've built this one, start to finish. This is my capabilities in all of these areas at this point.
Yeah. No.
Yeah, so that's why it's a bit maybe could be a bit risky.
No, I completely understand. I'm glad you get your perspectives on that as well, because obviously, like when it comes to the podcast, I like to try and kind of ask a bit of everything, because like, for example, when I reached out to the guys on Twitter, there was a bunch of interesting questions that popped up. Like for like this tends to be one that I'm not sure what it's like when you were starting off early on in your career, but there tended to be this kind of habit. So the question I have just now is like, was there any like tips and tricks that you tended to notice that people weren't sharing? Like, do you like when people tend to like, I guess like obviously like a lot of people want to get ahead.
Yeah.
Because I understand that obviously you kind of like you need to work hard, you need to kind of make a name for yourself. But was there anything that you kind of felt that kind of maybe helped you, if that makes sense?
Okay, so tips and tricks that maybe people weren't really sharing, but that are good to know.
Yeah, I know
Is that?
it's a difficult question, but I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
it's I'm trying to think about it. Um, yeah, that's a good question. I know there's probably a few things, but they're well, not that minor. So the biggest ones that maybe people don't share, not necessarily because they're mean-spirited, it's just because it's become muscle memory and they just did it for themselves.
Right.
It would be, I guess, the use of shortcuts in every sort of software that you use,
Oh, you
and
definitely.
trying to constantly have like the most, even if you save 5 seconds off of a certain thing, that one adds up over the years, over the months. So having shortcuts that very well, that will just become muscle memory, because you'll see people working and they're just like flying through that software. And when I got to Ubisoft at first, I think I asked some guy there, I was like, okay, how'd you do that? And then he showed me. And it was literally like just this whirlwind of button presses and mouse presses. And I was like, I have no idea what you did.
Yeah. Like
So he had to just like slow it down, half speed to just, okay, this is what I did.
Yeah.
So I think that would be one of the tips and tricks and another one would just be like a general workflow rule. Try to get it as, if you see something that, okay, I'm doing a lot of clicks for this thing, is there an easier way to do it? If yes, then, usually it takes you a bit longer when you learn something new. Okay, let's find a new way to do this. But afterwards, if it's faster, then you will have gained a lot.
Yeah. No,
Yeah, but overall, I think people in this industry are very open to just sharing a lot of stuff. So there's not many things that are hidden, at least not with a bad intention.
yeah. No, that's great to hear, because this was like a question that used to be popped up a lot when I was younger, in like literally my first few years, because maybe it was just the vibe or the environment that I was surrounded by. Like, I know sometimes it depends, but I've been blessed over the years to be taught by a lot of great people, and I'm pretty sure you are the same as well. And sometimes, like, I understand, like, obviously a lot of people want to maybe kind of get that little edge over maybe their classmates and stuff, but the best sort of thing I always advise people on the podcast is you just have to work together and make a good name, because like you said earlier, like the great point you said earlier was the networking aspect, and helping each other is one of the best things to do to increase that networking aspect.
Yeah.
Like it's
Yeah.
so crucial.
Definitely, like you don't want to, even if it helps you get ahead for a bit in college, you won't have to, overall, in the real world, it's not. There's so much knowledge that you keeping that tiny little bit for yourself is not gonna gain you anything, like
Mm-hmm.
literally anything. Let's say you know something to do, let's say someone knows how to do something a bit faster in Houdini.
Yeah.
It's such a small part of that whole software that it's not. It's just not gonna be such a big advantage ultimately.
Yeah, it's not going to be like a life changer, so to speak.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, people will know if they find out that, okay, he's been keeping stuff to himself. It's like, okay, that guy is not the nicest, which is, again, goes back to working in a team.
Yeah,
You won't be appreciated or, well liked, which is important. If you
exactly.
just, like huddle everything into your own little corners, like, screw you guys, I'm doing this.
No, I completely agree. I completely see where you're coming from. So the next question I always like to kind of bring up is like the benefits of going to university. Obviously, it's different for everyone, and like there's a lot of aspects that can kind of come into play and so forth. But like, what were the benefits that you learned? Was there any key things that kind of stood out to you?
Um, Benefit. Well, the benefit is obviously that you have people there specifically to just teach you. That's what they're there for. You have the networking aspect, so you meet a lot of people. I think that's the best thing that I got out of college personally, simply
Yeah,
because I ended up in a different field
yeah,
of study. But the people that I met there have been lifelong friends, and they still motivate me, even if they're different fields. It still motivates me to see them achieving and succeeding and struggling. Like it's good to have that support and seeing that sometimes you tend to feel like you're struggling by yourself, but it's hard for pretty much everyone. So that's definitely good to have that support and seeing people working hard and they motivate you. And like, sometimes you might not feel like it,
yeah,
but if you're in a group, the other people will like, okay, dude, come on, let's do it. And they kind of drag you along.
yeah,
So that's definitely one of the best aspects, I think, from going to university. In terms of the actual knowledge, like, again, it's hard for me to say simply because I haven't done a game art degree.
mm-hmm.
But again, just having the teachers being there and teaching you, especially if you have good teachers that can that can help you a lot.
Yeah, put you in the right direction.
Yeah, getting the right direction, and you don't have to Google or you have a very specific question, which is sometimes hard to find out. And instead of wasted time, you just go to the teacher, like, okay, what happened here? It's like, oh, well, you forgot to turn source
Yeah,
control on, so now it locked all your files or whatever,
it's a small.
stuff like that. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No worries. No, just because I remember being blocked for 2 days, for example, when I was learning CryEngine
Mm-hmm.
a long time ago, CryEngine 1 or 2, I forgot which one it was. But they didn't say anywhere because basically I couldn't save my scenes.
Mm-hmm.
I saved them, but they didn't show up anything. So I was like, what the hell is
Oh
happening?
gosh, right.
Basic,
Ouch.
yeah, and I basically had to Google for like 2 days straight
Yeah,
because I wasn't in college and I didn't have someone to, literally just ask.
yeah.
And I didn't even know what to Google for.
You.
So that's the thing that I'm talking about. And then I found out that I had source control turned on, and because of that, I didn't even know what source control was at the time.
Yeah.
And because of that, all my files wouldn't be saved. It had this sort of like internal bug. And I was like, damn it. And you tend to lose a lot of time instead of having that teacher just next to you.
You've mentioned two really good points that I've never heard on the podcast. No, that's awesome. Thanks so much for saying this.
Sure.
Because like file management and organization. Gee whiz, why have I never covered this on the podcast? What am I doing wrong here, Ross? No, because like it's so. Right, I'm not sure if you had this issue when you were in like obviously you pretty much touched on there, but it's like so every time I work, I don't do it anymore. So any companies who are listening, please don't don't go. I'm doing better now, okay? But it was like so when I was in uni, I literally would just like save like really late, or I would either I wouldn't have the most cleanest of structure for like file organization, and no, this is like another good point because like the other point I want to discuss after this one is like struggle, because struggle is a really important one, but final management, gee whiz, that's a biggie because like so many people like either name things wrong or like they don't organize things in a very kind of efficient way. I'm not sure if there's anything you could bring up on that.
Yes, absolutely. It's one of my pet peeves. I think naming conventions are extremely important, and it's hard to communicate to people why it's so important until they kind of encounter the problem themselves.
Mm-hmm.
The best examples that I can give is, sometimes certain systems might be automated, and if you name it improperly, it won't work. Which means why it's so important is because, for example, in a let's say you have like Ubisoft, 5 studios working on that project. If you break the build, or if you break anything, not even the whole build, but maybe you're breaking the mission that your colleague sitting across from you is working on,
Mm-hmm.
because you didn't respect the naming convention, you basically lost a day from the QA's job. You've wasted their day for nothing, and all of those delays add up, and it can add up to an actual delay of the whole game, which costs a lot of money. It can add up to maybe overtime, which you don't want, of course, and all of those things. Obviously, I'm kind of exaggerating a bit because you just naming a file. Well, actually, it can break a build, but
Yeah,
for
yeah.
artists at least, it doesn't really happen at that level. But you definitely slow other people down.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of someone else getting your file, like you mentioned that example with the car, uh, if it's not properly named, then people will just have to kind of reverse engineer your object, which
Yeah.
is again not good because they'll waste their time for nothing. And it's easy, it's good to think of, if you have a standard way. I know it can be a bit restrictive sometimes, but it's good to have it because you can automate certain things. You can, everyone works from the same kind of assumptions. Okay, this is named, I don't know, static mesh underscore vegetation underscore something. Then you know what you're working on, and it's easy to find in the folder structure, etc. So there's quite a lot of advantages to having a naming convention, and it needs to be respected.
Awesome. Because the issue so when I was in university, I had this awesome opportunity to work with Disney on a mentoring project, and basically when I was there, we had this issue in which all the students had to learn. So
Hmm.
I wasn't aware that so we were using Maya at the time.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if it's changed now, but basically at the time of the project, when it came to name conventions, you always had to include an underscore. I'm not sure if
Yeah.
that's changed now, but like there's certain ways to like name things and like number it and date it.
Hmm.
S-
Um, yeah, the underscore thing I think is quite specific to Maya. Well, not just Maya. It depends on how the software interprets your names, and usually spaces are problematic.
yeah,
But I think maybe a tech artist or someone who a programmer could have a better explanation in terms of history and why that is.
exactly.
But it's usually best practice to not have spaces. Yeah.
So like everyone who's tuning in, make sure to like really think about like your file structure, because at the end of the day, learning efficiency is so key, and exactly what Vlad said, like you don't be slowing down somebody else's workflow, because like one of the worst things is like making someone like kind of like a bottleneck or like stress out even more, because I
Mm.
understand that things kind of have to be done at a certain pace. Like obviously, like if you're new and you're learning, then it's okay. Like they're more laid back, but it's good to learn these things now, just so you're more prepared when you get that first job. Um,
Yeah. Definitely.
you mentioned a really good point. So and the reason why I'd like to bring it up is because also on the Twitter post as well, a lot of people brought this up, was like
Hmm.
struggles as an artist.
Hmm.
Um, like I can understand this is this is like another big question, but has there been any sort of main struggles along the way for you, that, or just things that you've noticed for artists that
Hmm.
maybe they could maybe, I guess, do a lot better, or like obviously like the common one is like health and like habits and stuff, but has there been anything maybe different, or you can say cliche stuff as well, because I always like to
Hmm.
drill that in as well.
Hmm. Okay. So it's not necessarily just struggling in relation to artists, struggling in any sort of way that relates to you being as an artist.
Yeah, like a bit of both would be great if that's okay.
Hmm. Yeah, 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 sure. I'm just trying to think of some examples or things that I usually notice.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I guess it depends a lot on the personality of the person as well. Some people tend to overwork themselves,
Yeah.
and I've seen that happen quite a bit, and it happened to me as well. I honestly don't know what advice to give, unfortunately, which I know kind of sucks.
That's okay.
But simply because unless you go through it, you don't really understand it.
Yeah.
Like understanding that, okay, this is not, you know, you have to go through something to understand it properly and then prioritize according to that. So I can say do not overwork yourself, or if you do, make sure that it'll bring you some quantifiable, clear advantages if you decide to do that, and make it for a certain period of time and just assume that that period of time will be a struggle. But don't do it recklessly and thinking, you know, you're Superman and yeah, sure, it's fine. You, even especially when you're younger, you know, you tend to not think about your time or your health, stuff like that, because you've had so much of it.
Yeah.
But that's the worst time to use it up. So definitely don't do that. And in terms of struggling with art, I think honestly it's always good to be struggling at least a bit. And in terms of creating art, struggle is usually good because that's when you're learning, you know.
Yeah.
If you're not struggling, you're just going through emotions. And that's when you become bored and jaded and not really learning anything new. So on that side, this is why I try to separate it into a personal struggle and the art struggle. Because the art struggle, if you're struggling on that one, it's usually a good sign because you're learning new things. So that one I would definitely endorse.
That's an awesome one. I like what you said about the art one because, like for example, there's one topic I think it'd be really cool to talk about is substance designer, if that's okay. It'd be really cool because of
course.
So everyone who's listening, once again, so on Vlad's art station, he's doing this incredible Paris collection series of textures, and the make sure to go check out and really look into what he's been doing, because when it comes to, so I talked about this with a texture artist on the last podcast, Kyle, and I really want to kind of bring up the topic of seeing more people doing designer, because even myself, like I've never done designer, I've never touched it yet, and I'd really like to just start learning it. And I think it'd be great if more universities started using it, because I still think it's still like the university I went to had substance painter, but I don't recall it having designer. Maybe it does, but I don't ever recall it getting mentioned. But it'd just be great to hear like what's your thoughts on substance designer, because I know obviously you use it and stuff. It'd just be great to kind of hear your perspective on it.
Yeah, it's a bit disappointing to hear that universities, not all of them, still haven't integrated designer, because it's kind of standard right now.
Yeah.
There's multiple reasons for that. Most of them kind of. So I personally love designer. I didn't get along with it for the longest time.
Okay.
I was like, this is not for me. It's not the most artistic tool in the world. You know, you feel like, what am I doing? Just connecting nodes. That was coming from the ZBrush workflow, where you kind of, you know, sculpted sculpted a series of bricks, for example, and then you built the brick wall. But ultimately, designer is so much better at these sort of things. You don't have to necessarily manually sculpt every single thing. You have to take a more of a bird's eye view of your material and make sure that everything looks and works correctly in multiple situations. And I love its flexibility the most. So, you know, let's say taking the brick wall material, a lot of times you'll find out, you know, when let's say you make a 8x5 wall material, right? Brick wall material, and you put it in game and you realize, shit, is it okay if I swear?
Yeah, be yourself, man. Fire away. Say whatever you want.
It just came out.
It's okay, man. It's like, do your thing.
Okay. So, you know, sometimes in game you just find out that, you know, it's not the right proportion, so you want to change it. In ZBrush, that would mean almost remaking the whole texture, because you'd have to rearrange them, retile them, basically redo everything almost. In Substance Designer, it's like, oh, well, I'll just change the tiling, and it's literally like a 2-second thing that you need to do. Yeah. And also having multiple variations based off of one single material, that's just absolutely amazing to me. So I think Substance Designer is definitely standard right now. Of course, the thing is, the industry is moving so fast.
Yeah.
So I think the standard soonish will be a combination, so a hybrid approach between scan materials and procedurally created materials. Because you can't, it's hard to achieve as much realism as you would scanning a material. It's just extremely difficult and time consuming.
Yeah.
But if you take certain elements from, scanned materials, for example, combining real life scanned bricks, going by off of the same example, one, it makes your workflow a lot faster, and also you get better results. So I think the hybrid will be one of the ways going forward.
No, I'm happy that you said that, because so the one thing I always like to highlight on the podcast is the fact that not only obviously you have to keep up to the trends and stuff, but it's being open to acknowledge the fact that there's some things that are just done better, like procedurally, and a lot of people, I still have that. It's what I was saying earlier. Is like that sort of concept of ownership in their heads, or they think it's going to like take away their job. And I think the good thing about it's the great thing about texturing. It's like what you said there. It provides you with flexibility, and obviously when it comes to like the modeling aspect, like for example, modeling is my favorite part, and I kind of like to take ownership in that case. However, obviously I have to acknowledge the fact that when I get a job, that everything kind of bounces around, and you have to go with the flow with how the company works, etc. But when it comes to like working on your portfolio, like it's such a biggie. Like doing things that are up to date, like for example, like Vlad's saying now. So if you're listening in, learn a bit of Substance Designer, trying to bring that into your pipeline, because highlighting that on your portfolio, on your ArtStation, etc., it's going to go a long way, because it shows that you've got the skills. And then like another great one is that you brought up there was the scans, like the mega scans, and like I've noticed that like that become a big occurrence lately. Like I think it's longer than the last few years. It's probably, well, I don't know, maybe last 2 years it's really become a thing. I might be wrong, maybe longer, I think.
No, scan materials they've risen. Yeah, they had a pretty rapid descent in the last few years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it makes sense because the quality of some of them is absolutely amazing, and you're not gonna get the same. For example, I don't know, rocks. Rocks I see, they're always scanned and used, and the realism is just hard to beat, especially for certain types of rock formations. The artist is gonna go crazy trying to do that in ZBrush.
Yeah.
So it makes sense to scan them. It's just, again, I'm coming back to the flexibility thing. When you scan something, you have to plan around that. Okay, I want this sort of environment, and I know for sure that I want this environment. I'm going to find it here, and you have to plan dimensions. So it's not the workflow itself is not that easy as it might seem, simply because you're scanning stuff. It becomes more difficult in the planning stages.
Okay.
But it's definitely helping us to achieve a lot of very realistic looking things. I'm just looking at Quixel stuff, and the Unity demo team doing really amazing stuff with scanned assets.
Yeah, I heard a lot about the Quixel stuff. I really have to start looking into it, because that's the crazy thing. There's so much stuff going on. You're just like, whoa, what to do, what to choose. But that's the great thing. And like another thing you mentioned there is actually relates back to another question from Twitter. So when it comes to environments, a lot of people tend to kind of ask themselves, right, do I make a larger environment? Do I make a small environment? And sometimes, obviously, it can be overwhelming. Like it does, like for example, you just nailed it there, like you said, was like just because you're using mega scans, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make it easier. But is there any advice you maybe have for environment artists who are listening about working with bigger environments? Is there any kind of tips that you've learned along the way?
Yeah. I understand that need, because I literally did the same thing when I started out. So the Paris scene, which is like my very first full environment within a game engine, because that was the purpose back then. In my, when I started out, I was like, I'm doing the whole city. So it was very dumb of me to do that. I tried to make it as big as possible, but then along the way I realized that it's just not going to be possible in the time frame that I had. So my advice would be start off smaller, but putting as much care as you can into every single thing that you're putting into that small scene. So even if you're just creating, I don't know, a room, for example, make sure that the floor material, the walls material, which will have a very they'll cover a large surface of your final image. Make sure that those are top notch, or as as good as you can possibly make them. Props, again, make sure they're very good. Lighting, very good. It's a small scene, I know, but that's how you show quality, because if you can do quality at that scale, then you can do it at a larger scale as well. A larger scale, presents different challenges, of course. But it's better to be able to do really good quality at a small scale than, do mediocre quality at a very large scale.
Yeah, because it's...
So I would, definitely go towards that at first.
It's so, like what you said there, is like to me, because I was the same as you, like I have, I'm still a big culprit of this myself, I'm not going to lie. So, like I finished this train piece, and then my next piece at the moment is like, I said it in the last podcast, is like 10 times the size of my last piece.
10 times?
No joke. It's have you ever heard of this is like so I have like, so obviously we all have our favorite artists, so this is or like artists that we really like. So one of my artists that I really like is he goes by Paper Blue on ArtStation.
I know him. He's amazing, extremely productive.
Like, oh my gosh, like the amount of artists, like you just said, that like, the amount of artwork this guy posts a week, like, dude, like,
and it's good. It's always good. I'm like, how are you doing this?
Yeah, it's mental. Like I like, so I sent him a message last week, and so this is actually one thing that I actually want to bring up, just because it just came to my mind. So one of our guests next week, who's coming on the podcast, I'm really looking forward to her coming on. But she put a public post the other day about people like copying her work. And
copying her work.
Yeah, and so this is the craziest, one of the craziest stories I ever heard. So basically, this person used her work for their honors project and didn't give her like any mention at all. And I was like, wow! Like they literally used they did exactly her work, for her honors, for the person's like the person, you know what I mean? And I was like, dude, like that's crazy. And that's why, like, the reason why I'm bringing this up is because when I reached out to the guy Paper Blue, I'm so sorry I forgot your name, but he goes by Paper Blue, and such a crazy awesome concept artist. Make sure to check out his work. And he said, yeah, you can make my work, just make sure it looks cool. Like that was his literal comment. I was like, I'm down. Okay. So, like, the reason why I brought this up, because when it comes to large environments, the one tip I would say, and this is what I was taught by a guy who's helped me, Alex Drajomin, when it comes to posting big work, I wouldn't necessarily post your process on ArtStation until you've like kind of finished it, because he said that he recommends, like, obviously everyone has a different perspective, but Alex was saying to me it's better just to show, like, if you are going for a big piece, just show the completed piece.
Yeah. I'm trying to think about. Yeah, definitely. So, I'm not sure I understood what his reasoning was. Why would you only post the finished piece?
Oh, so basically what he was saying to me. So what I tend to do is that on my ArtStation, I always if there's a certain project that I think is maybe, I guess, heading the right direction, or I've done quite a lot, I tend to kind of show my breakdown, and it's not even finished yet. But he was saying that to me, that it is good though just to maybe just make a post on ArtStation that's your just like your full post, and then break it down once you've got the finished piece.
Oh, okay. Yeah, okay, I understand what he was saying. Yeah, that's I mean, I guess that can be valid for any sort of environment that you're doing. In terms of the larger ones, those are very tricky. It depends how large and how deep you go into it. Basically, you could have a very nice, a large environment, but if it's a good composition and it's mostly vegetation, then obviously it's a lot more achievable than a whole city.
Yeah.
So it depends on not just the scale, but the type of the project that you're making. But in that case, when it's about scale, I think Houdini and procedural placement can help a lot, and it's good to know those tools.
Yeah, because you have to think smart. Because, like, for example, the piece that I know I'm going to tackle is I need to know which places to use, like, multiple duplicates, etc. And like you said, where should I use the procedural? Because, like, I generally think this piece is going to take me like 6 months minimum.
Yeah, the thing is, if you're enjoying it, like, the thing that I said earlier, it's about, what you want to show, and it depends on the timeline as well.
Yeah.
So ultimately, the most important thing is still going towards what you really enjoy. So if you really want to do this huge piece, go for it. Just tying it to what I said, it's important to still show high quality throughout, which is harder to achieve at a larger scale.
Yeah.
But it's not. Yeah, it's harder in terms of time and stuff like that.
Because it's like, I think the biggest thing that I'm going to have to learn for this is not necessarily just efficiency, but I really need to master how to use lower polys but better texturings to make it look as if it's higher poly. So like getting the balance between the two, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, yeah, and definitely you need to. Yeah, that's another thing. You need to take performance into consideration a lot more than on a smaller piece.
Yeah.
So LODs, maybe even kill distances. It depends on what you're doing, of course.
Yeah.
A lot of things that need to take you need to take in consideration. But it's an exciting challenge, I would say.
Thanks for going into depth about that, because it's like a few artists were asking about like bigger environments, and it's always one that I've always liked to tackle myself.
Yeah.
So the next question, and it tends to be like the main sort of question that I like to bring up. Obviously, there's like no like it's not like an argument between the two, but it's always like to hear your perspective on like online courses and like university, etc. Has there been any like great online courses that you've maybe that you've not done but you've maybe heard of, or any great resources online that you've used to improve you as an artist?
I haven't personally done any actual courses online, although I know there's quite a few really good ones. The Peyton Varney one looks really good. I think Clinton Crumpler has one as well, and he's an amazing artist.
Okay.
There was two that I was really interested in on Udemy, I think, about Houdini procedural generation, and one of the guy who was teaching it, I worked with him for a short time while I was working in Paris on Watch Dogs. He's a really, really talented guy, and he shows you how to make vegetation in Houdini, which is really an exciting workflow.
Wait, you can make vegetation. I completely did not know this. You can make vegetation in Houdini.
Well, you can. It just depends. He's making the flat cards and the actual textures in Houdini, so it has a tool where you can just draw a spline and it automatically creates, puts everything on the spline, because again, Houdini is very good with placing things.
Wow, I didn't
I'm underplaying how amazing Houdini is. Don't get me wrong. It's amazing. It's just, that power is sometimes extremely impressive, and I can feel like magic. So it's easier to do it like that if you learn the initial workflow than actually, just putting everything manually in Maya or Max. So it's definitely something that I recommend, giving a watch. But resources that I've actually used have been Gumroad, mostly from tutorials from people who I know are very good, like Daniel Figger and Joshua Lynch. Daniel Figger's series called Substance Fundamentals, I think.
Okay.
If you do those 5 videos, you're not going to have any trouble technically with Substance Designer in going forward at all. They are absolutely amazing, and they're the best resources on that subject that I've had so far.
What's his name again? Sorry.
Daniel Figger.
Daniel Figger. Right. Okay.
He's an amazing. If you haven't heard of him yet, he's absolutely amazing artist.
Perfect.
And he has this series which will knock it out of the park for you. You will be able to learn Substance Design after those 5. Yeah, after that, it's just up to you as an artist, observing the actual material, knowing how to gather reference, what to look for, and how much amount of work you want to put in.
Definitely.
Yeah, so those definitely, Joshua Lynch and Daniel Finger have been, in terms of tutorials, an amazing help.
Great. No, that's awesome to hear, because the amount of stuff I'm learning in this podcast, this is great. Because like to me, it's always been about like I was saying earlier, like I always had this passion for, obviously, environment art, and modeling was my thing, but my biggest weakness in terms of the pipeline was always not just like the efficiency, but it was the making sure that like it was like identifying where I could use textures better than just modeling and sculpting it, because I always had, like, I love sculpting, like I could use ZBrush non-stop. However, I wasn't necessarily maybe making a piece as efficient as it could be, and I understand how important it is when it comes to games. Like even film as well. Like obviously, film you have more, I guess, leeway. I might be wrong. Like people might be saying you're completely wrong there, Ross. But I think you have, I don't know. Yeah, there's more
With
limitations.
Yeah, with movies, the thing is you have the shot already established, and that makes your job a bit easier in terms of, okay, I know what I'm doing. You know composition, you know what to smartly add in post process or not, what to model or not, because you know how far it will be from the camera, from the viewer, and it's only that shot, so you can prioritize, okay, this shot is 1 second. I'm not going to put the same amount of time as in that shot that takes a minute.
Yeah.
With games, it's harder to kind of predict this because the player can look whatever. So it's harder to establish a good composition. So you have to have a overall vision of literally the whole thing that you're building.
Yeah.
Because the player will be able to go wherever you want. Well, on the set path. So that's another important thing in games. This is why it's important to talk to your level designer. Ask him what the path of the player is or what the expected path is, and that's where you put the most work. Because that's the part that the player will always guaranteed, if it's playing your game, he's going to see it.
Yeah, no, that's a good one, because I think so many, like for example, me as well, I keep bringing things back to myself because it's so much easier to kind of relate to.
Sure.
So obviously you go for quality and stuff, but like you said, for example, when it comes to you said earlier, the group project aspect in university and stuff, and obviously the personal projects as well. It's the balance between the two, but identify, keep asking the questions when you're making these pieces. Do I really need to have maybe a certain level of detail over there? For example, the big one that that was mentioned by Kyle in the last podcast was it's still very rare that you see a 4K texture. It's still not common. It's still obviously 2K.
No, it's extremely rare. Yeah.
So it's identify what Vlad was saying there about what story are you trying to obviously say, and what kind of level of detail is required, and through understanding of that, you'll show to the employer that you're efficient, you're working smart, and that's so good to show, and it plays such a big part.
Yeah, and that's actually valid for everything that you're building as an artist, because it's your own time, and we all have very limited amount of it, so you don't want to waste it. So ultimately, if you just want to show an image, then focus on everything that's in that image looking amazing. It's useless if you just build a whole environment, but you only see, only one small part of it. Yeah. So it's important to take that into both personal and professional projects.
I actually got so this is another question that just came to my mind, was when it comes to the whole idea of ownership. So when it comes to a portfolio, say I'm a new student, and I'm wanting to maybe get into a game, and I've worked in this environment, and I'm right, I want to save time. What's your idea? What's your thoughts on using used assets, and then but obviously make sure to label that you've used them, but obviously you need to get a balance, because obviously you need to show you can do the work. But what's your thoughts on using used assets?
So using, for example, that's a good question. What the proportion of used versus stuff that you've made? For a student, I guess it would be very important. It's probably depends on the type of job that you're going for. So if it's pure level art, which I wouldn't recommend limiting yourself like that, because you need to know how to build certain objects yourself. But, only in that case, I would say, okay, then use pre-made assets. It's also for the lighting job, if you're a lighting artist, then use pre-made objects, because people want to see the lighting and how it's changed the mood of the scene more than just, okay, well, can he build, the house? Because that's not part of your job description. But if you're going for the environment artist position or a prop artist, I would stay away from pre-made assets, or at least keep them in a very small proportion and not have them be the main focus.
Okay.
Just to give an example, if, for example, you're doing a gun, right? You're learning how to do hard surface modeling.
Yeah.
And let's say you want to do a nice presentation for it. and put it in, I don't know, let's say mud, then for all I care, put it in the mud that you got from Quixel because it looks great. But the gun needs to be yours.
Yeah.
So you can combine them in a smart way, but the main focus of the piece has to be something that you've done, I think.
No, I completely agree, because I think it's like the reason why I like to bring this point up quite a lot, because I think it's crucial to know, because presentation at the end of the day is everything, and obviously you need to know like how to maybe like sell your piece even better, and using things that make it, like you said, such as the mud and so forth. It can go a long way, and like there tends to be like a common trend. Obviously, not necessarily just. I wouldn't say it's with environment artists, but well, maybe it is. But because like this is a very debatable point I'm about to make. So you see like the title prop artist, but to me, like is prop artist like an actual role in the sense that, or is it just necessarily like environment art that they do props along the way? Like, I'm not an expert on this, but like when it comes to like I see on ArtStation prop artists, like you'll see like the common layout. Like they'll have like a thumbnail that is obviously just their prop, and it's all along. But like, I'm trying to think what's the best way. How could I ask you this question? But I don't know.
Yeah.
What am I trying to? Do you know what I mean?
I'm trying to understand the question.
Yeah, exactly. Me too.
Right. You asking me as a prop artist what would be the best way to present it, or?
Yeah, because like obviously like when it comes to like they're two different things, but obviously like prop artist is also common for environment art as well, because obviously you have to like master both. Like obviously you have to be skilled at modeling, skilled at texturing, but I understand like the roles require like there's different requirements for each thing.
Yeah, they're a bit different depending on what you're doing. So it's a bit like I wouldn't necessarily put them together too much. Although you do, for example, for environment art, it's very important to know more about how to use styleable textures, trim sheets, composition, lighting, all those things, rather than actually making, for example, the trash or the bucket, for example, making it look amazingly well. You should put as much effort as you can, and to raise the quality of every prop that you make in the scene. But as an environment artist, I think it's best to have an overview of the whole environment, rather than just focus on one prop. In terms of actual presentation, there's two artists who really, I think, well, that I know, that there's multiple artists, but the two that come to mind right now, because I've also worked with them and I know their stuff is really high quality, is Maximilian Velasquez.
Right.
I think he's a weapon artist at Embark right now. He has amazing presentation, really good lighting, highlighting all the unique details that he has done. If he has an animation, it's really well done. And Alexander Zelensky, I might have butchered his name. But those two, in terms of presentation, are, for my personal opinion, very good examples.
Awesome. To everyone who's listening, by the way, as always, I always make sure to include every artist's name in the comments below. So all these names that Vlad's bringing up, make sure to go check them out. And like for example, the tutorials as well with Josh Lynch, etc. Take advantage of all this, because I know exactly, like after this podcast, I'm going to flood myself with information off these guys. So
good, they're really good.
Like it's the thing is like there's so many great names out there that I still think like you'll know yourself, like for example, like there's so many artists out there right now, whether it's games or film or even concept art, that maybe they're not as well known of, you know what I mean? Like like there's so many great artists that people need to start taking advantage of, and that's when it comes to the whole student education thing. I wish the system was like, I know this is like impossible for me to ask for and stuff, but it'd be great if I had to say what would I want from student education, it would be having industry experts like coming in at least just like once a week or once a month, and just kind of like give people like a taste of how to actually like how things actually work, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I've heard that from multiple people going to a game art degree, for example.
Yeah.
It's the most requested thing that I've heard from each and every one of them, and I agree. I understand. I think it's hard to, from what I understood, because it's kind of hard to get those people in.
Yeah, definitely.
limited time, or it's schedule is not working out. A lot of things, that a lot of logistics not working out. But I agree. It's for that. I think it's really good for students as much as they can afford and can just go to a lot of art shows and festivals, like I don't know, the Unreal Fest that was recently in Prague, I think.
All right. Okay. Nice.
Yeah, any sort of gathering of artists that work in the field that you want to work in. It's amazing if you go there and just talk to them, because everyone that I've met is super passionate, and you just have to ask, and especially after you had a beer, the conversation will flow very smoothly, and they're very helpful.
You're all sorted once it's down.
Yeah.
Ask
No
away. You're sorted.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, man, for coming on. By the way, this has been like a great podcast.
Thank you for having me on.
It's been a pleasure. Once again, everyone, as always, make sure to take advantage and go give Vlad a follow. Check out his Twitter. What sort of social media is it? Twitter, ArtStation, etc.
ArtStation mostly. I started off Twitter quite recently, so I need to kind of build that one up.
Okay.
And that's it for so far, I think.
Awesome.
Yep.
So everyone, make sure to check the links in below. As always, I always showcase the artists and social media on the background as you're listening in. If you're listening onto the 9 other platforms besides YouTube, there's like a different tag that lets you access them. So if you're listening on Anchor or Spotify, make sure to check them out as well. But thanks once again, man. It's been a pleasure.
Thank you, Ross.
Everyone who's tuning in, please leave a like if you enjoyed today's podcast. Don't forget to subscribe. I've got three or four guests this week. I'm losing count. So looking forward to those talks. But till next time, can't we speak? We will see you in the next video. Thanks once again, guys.